call came in just after midnight, piercing through the static of the radio like a blade. Station 42, emergency response needed at 116 Maple Ridge. Family trapped inside, fire advancing rapidly. Captain Evan Carter barely had time to acknowledge the dispatch before his team was in motion. The sirens screamed as their engine tore through the desolate streets, the inferno in the distance painting the skyline in hues of orange and black. The wildfire had already swallowed acres of land, devouring homes, businesses, and everything in its path. In the back of the truck, Jake Lawson, the youngest firefighter on the crew, gripped the edge of his seat, his heart hammering. He had seen fires before, too many to count, but something about this one felt different, more personal. "They're still inside," he muttered to himself, his eyes fixed on the thick smoke curling into the night sky. Beside him, Mike Hernandez, a veteran firefighter with a decade of experience, tightened his harness and gave Jake a reassuring nod. "We'll get them out, kid. We always do." But as they approached the address, dread clawed at Jake's gut. The house was fully engulfed. Flames roared through the windows, licking at the roof as embers rained down like burning snowflakes. The heat pressed against them, even from yards away, an invisible force that stole their breath. Jake jumped out of the truck, the adrenaline pushing him forward. "We have to go in!" Evan's voice cut through the chaos, sharp and commanding. "Jake, hold! It's too far gone." "But no signs of life," Evan shouted. "If they were in there, they're not anymore." Jake felt his knees weaken as he stared at the inferno. The fire had a way of making everything disappear, hope, strength, even time itself. But something gnawed at him. They had been so close. If only they'd arrived a few minutes earlier. Mike grabbed his arm, pulling him back toward the engine. "Come on, Jake, we did what we could." But had they? The fire raged on through the night, and by morning, the once grand house on Maple Ridge was nothing but charred ruins. The team stood in silence, staring at what remained, a blackened skeleton of a home that once held laughter, life, and love. As the sun rose, the reality of their failure sank in. Evan walked over, his eyes hollow, his voice thick. "The family? They didn't make it." Jake's stomach dropped. "They were trying to escape," Evan continued, his hands trembling. "They almost made it to the street, just a few yards more, and..." His voice cracked. "We were too late." Jake swallowed hard, the weight of guilt settling deep in his chest. He thought about the voices they never heard, the faces they never saw. He thought about what it meant to be a firefighter, to save people, to be their last hope. And in this moment, he felt like they had failed. Later that afternoon, the crew combed through the smoldering remains, looking for anything salvageable. The smell of burnt wood and melted metal filled the air, the ground crunching under their boots. Jake wiped sweat from his brow, his throat dry and tight. And then he saw it. A small, charred stuffed bear lying in the ashes, its button eyes still intact, staring back at him. Next to it, a family photo, miraculously untouched by the fire. A mother, a father, two little girls, all smiling brightly against the backdrop of the very house they now stood in the remains of. Jake's breath hitched. "It shouldn't have survived," Mike whispered beside him, shaking his head. "Nothing else did." Jake picked up the photo with trembling hands, the weight of it crushing him, the guilt, the what-ifs, the unbearable sense of loss. "They were right there," he murmured, his voice breaking. "They were so close." Evan placed a hand on his shoulder. "We did everything we could, Jake." But had they? The doubt gnawed at him, creeping into the corners of his mind. He stared at the photo, feeling as if the family's eyes were staring right back, asking him why they hadn't been fast enough. That night, sleep didn't come easily. The station was quiet, but Jake couldn't shake the lingering whispers of the fire. The crackling flames haunted his mind, but worse were the phantom voices, the ones that begged for help too late. And then, as he sat in the dim break room, staring blankly at his coffee, the radio crackled. "Station 42, please help us." Jake froze, his blood turning to ice. He grabbed the radio. "Dispatch, say again." Static. Then, "Please, we're still here." Jake bolted upright, his heart pounding. "Who is this?" The voice crackled again, distorted, ghostly. "We didn't make it." Jake dropped the radio, stumbling backward, his hands shaking. He rushed to Evan's bunk, waking him. "Did you hear that?" Evan rubbed his eyes, confused. "Hear what?" Jake hesitated. "The call? The family? They're still out there?" Evan stared at him, concern etched across his face. "Jake, the fire's out. They're gone." But the radio crackled one more time, and Jake heard it, softer this time. "You were so close." The next day, Jake stood at the edge of the ruins, the photo still in his pocket. He pulled it out, staring at the family frozen in time, and whispered, "I'm sorry." The wind shifted, carrying the scent of ash and something else, something faint. "We know." Jake turned sharply, but there was no one there. Just the remains of the house and the ever-present reminder that sometimes, no matter how hard they tried, they couldn't save everyone. But that wouldn't stop him from trying. Some fires can't be put out, some families never truly leave, and some calls never stop echoing.